You think you know loneliness, but you don't. Not the kind Carl Jung discovered. Not the kind that turns children into walking X-ray machines who see through everyone but stay invisible themselves. If you grew up feeling like a ghost in your own family, surrounded by people who never really saw you, Jung found something terrifying about what happened to your brain. Today, I'm revealing how childhood emotional invisibility doesn't just wound you, it weaponizes you. And the hyper-independence you're so proud of? Jung called it a survival mechanism that's slowly destroying your ability to ever truly connect. Let me paint you a picture. Consider a composite example based on patterns Jung observed across multiple cases. A child sits at the dinner table. Parents are physically present, but emotionally somewhere else. The child learns quickly that crying doesn't bring comfort. Asking for attention brings annoyance. Needing anything makes everyone uncomfortable. So the child stops needing, stops asking, starts watching instead. This is what Jung called the emotional vacuum, not abuse that leaves bruises, not abandonment that makes headlines, just the quiet absence of emotional presence. Parents who feed you but never see you. Siblings who share your space but never know your heart. A house full of people where you learn to raise yourself. The child becomes what Jung documented across his clinical observations as the little adult. The kid who never throws tantrums because they figured out tantrums don't work. The teenager who handles their own problems because asking for help feels like speaking a foreign language. The young adult who seems so mature, so independent, so together. But here's what nobody tells you. That wasn't maturity. That was adaptation to emotional starvation. And your brain literally rewired itself to survive it. Modern neuroscience has validated what Jung observed in his practice. When children grow up in emotionally absent environments, their neural pathways develop differently. The parts of the brain responsible for reading social cues become hyperactive. The regions that process emotional data go into overdrive. It's not psychological theory anymore. It's measurable brain development. Jung discovered these children don't just survive their loneliness. They develop something he called differentiated perception. While other kids learn social skills through normal parent-child bonding, the invisible child learns something else entirely. They learn to read the room like a battlefield. When you can't rely on people to tell you the truth, you learn to find it yourself. When you can't trust that someone will notice you're struggling, you learn to notice when they're struggling instead. When emotional safety never comes from others, you create safety by knowing exactly what everyone around you is thinking and feeling. The invisible child becomes the scanner, an emotional surveillance system, a human lie detector. By the time they're adults, they can walk into any room and know who's faking happiness, who's hiding anger, who's secretly desperate. They read micro-expressions like other people read traffic lights. They sense emotional temperature shifts that others completely miss. This isn't a superpower they chose. It's a survival mechanism they built, neuron by neuron, day after day, throughout a childhood spent invisible. Jung's clinical notes describe individuals who could map someone's entire psychological profile after 5 minutes of conversation. They saw through social masks. They detected hidden agendas. They felt the tension in rooms that everyone else pretended wasn't there. And it made them incredibly lonely. Because here's the dark secret Jung uncovered. The more clearly you see people, the harder it becomes to trust them. When you can detect every small lie, every performance, every social facade, genuine connection starts feeling impossible. You're surrounded by people wearing masks, and you're the only one who can see the masks aren't real faces. Think about what that does to you over time. Every conversation becomes an analysis. Every interaction becomes a puzzle to solve. Every relationship becomes a psychological assessment. You can't turn it off. The scanner is always running, always processing, always detecting the gap between what people say and what they actually feel. Someone tells you they're fine, but you see the tension in their jaw. Someone says they're happy for you, but you catch the flash of envy in their eyes. Someone claims to support you, but you sense the judgment underneath their words, and you can't unsee it. You can't unhear it. You can't unknow what you know. This is the curse of differentiated perception. You see truth that others miss, but seeing that truth isolates you from the comfortable illusions that let other people connect easily. But the scanner ability isn't even the most dangerous part. The real trap is what Jung called hyper-independence. And this is where the invisible child's adaptation becomes their prison. Think about it. When you grew up emotionally invisible, what did you learn? You learned that needing people is dangerous. You learned that relying on others leads to disappointment. You learned that the only person you can truly count on is yourself. So you built a fortress of independence. You became the person who never asks for help, the friend everyone leans on but who leans on no one, the partner who gives endlessly but struggles to receive, the professional who handles everything alone. You wear your independence like armor. I don't need anyone. I can handle it myself. I'm fine. And on the surface it looks like strength. People admire your self-sufficiency. They praise your capability. They call you resilient. But Jung saw through it. He recognized hyper-independence not as strength, but as a trauma response. Not as confidence, but as a defense mechanism against the terror of being disappointed again. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. The invisible child grows into an adult who unconsciously operates from one core belief. If I need you, you'll let me down. So I simply won't need you. Let's look at a narrative illustration that captures this dynamic. Picture an adult who grew up emotionally invisible. They're successful, competent. Everyone sees them as having it together. They're the friend people call in crisis, the colleague who always delivers, the family member who solves everyone's problems. But inside, they're running on empty. They're exhausted from giving. They're depleted from constant emotional labor. They're drowning in their own unmet needs, and they won't tell anyone. Can't tell anyone? Because admitting need feels like admitting failure. This is where it gets really twisted, because the hyper-independent adult empath has another pattern Jung documented across multiple cases. They attract broken people like magnets. Why? Because broken people need fixing, and fixing people is safe. When you're busy solving someone else's problems, you don't have to acknowledge your own. When you're rescuing someone from their chaos, you get to feel needed without being vulnerable. The hyper-independent empath builds relationships where they're the strong one, the stable one, the helper. They date people who need saving. They befriend people who require endless emotional labor. They work for bosses who demand constant accommodation. And they do all this while maintaining their fortress. I'm helping you, but I don't need your help. I'm here for you, but don't ask me to be vulnerable with you. It's a perfect system, except it's not. Because underneath all that giving, underneath all that helping, underneath all that emotional labor, something is building. Jung called it the silent rage. Here's what happens. The adult empath gives and gives and gives. They read people perfectly. They anticipate needs. They provide emotional support. They sacrifice their own desires to accommodate others. And deep down, they're waiting for someone to read them the way they read everyone else. Waiting for someone to notice they're struggling without having to ask. Waiting for someone to see through their mask of competence and say, you don't have to be strong right now. But it never happens, because the hyper-independent empath has trained everyone around them to believe they don't need anything. They've perfected the performance of being fine. They've made it clear through years of behavior that they're the helper, not the helped. So people take and take and take, not because they're malicious, but because the empath has made it seem like giving is all they want to do, and the rage builds, silent, hidden, denied even to themselves. Why doesn't anyone see I'm struggling? Why do I have to do everything alone? Why does no one think to ask if I'm okay? But here's the kicker. When someone does try to help, the hyper-independent empath pushes them away. When someone offers support, they deflect. When someone tries to reciprocate care, they minimize their own needs. I'm fine. I've got it. Don't worry about me. The fortress is so complete they can't let anyone in even when they desperately want to. The rejection of help isn't conscious cruelty, it's reflexive protection. Because somewhere deep in their psychological wiring, accepting help equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals the risk of being let down, and being let down equals the confirmation of their deepest childhood fear, that they truly are alone, so they stay alone, by choice that doesn't feel like choice, in isolation that masquerades as strength. Jung documented another exhausting pattern in his observations, the chameleon fatigue. This happens when the adult empath's scanner ability combines with their need to keep everyone comfortable. They walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature, tension between co-workers, unspoken conflict at family dinner, hidden resentment in their relationship, and without even thinking about it, they adjust. They become whatever the room needs, cheerful to lighten heavy energy, quiet to avoid adding to chaos, agreeable to prevent conflict, entertaining to distract from pain. It happens so automatically they don't even realize they're doing it. But by the end of the day, they're exhausted. By the end of the week, they can't remember what their own authentic emotions even feel like. This is what Jung called the persona problem. The public mask becoming so dominant that the real self disappears underneath it. The invisible child learned early that their authentic self wasn't welcomed, so they built a version of themselves that was the helpful one, the easy one, the one who doesn't cause problems. And that performance worked so well, brought so much approval, prevented so much conflict, that they kept doing it, year after year, relationship after relationship, until the performance became their identity. But performances are exhausting, and eventually something breaks. We see this pattern clearly in composite case profiles Jung developed. The high-functioning adult who seems to have everything together. Career success, social connections, impressive resilience. And then suddenly, without warning, they collapse. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it's quiet, a slow withdrawal, a gradual numbness, a creeping sense that nothing matters anymore, because they've spent so long being what everyone needed that they forgot how to be real. They've invested so much energy into their persona that their authentic self has atrophied from neglect. And one day they wake up and realize they don't know who they actually are anymore. Jung documented the breaking point, the moment the adult empath realizes their independence is actually isolation. The moment they understand their strength is actually a wall. The moment they see that they're lonely in a crowded room because they built a fortress instead of bridges. This realization usually comes through crisis. A relationship ends because the empath couldn't let their partner in. A friendship dissolves because the empath never shared their real struggles. A health crisis hits because the empath ignored their own needs for too long. A burnout so complete they can't keep performing anymore. And suddenly they see it. The pattern they've been running their entire life. The walls they built to protect themselves from. Disappointment have protected them right into complete isolation. They realize they're surrounded by people who don't actually know them, because they've never let anyone know them. They've been so busy being what everyone needed that they forgot to be real. This is the moment Jung called the crisis of false independence, when the fortress reveals itself as a prison. The adult empath looks around and sees all their relationships are transactional, built on what they provide, not who they are. People love the helper version, the strong version, the capable version. But would anyone love them if they stopped performing? Would anyone stay if they admitted need? Would anyone care if they weren't useful? These questions are terrifying because often the answer feels like no. But here's where Jung's work becomes transformative, because he didn't just identify the problem, he mapped the solution. He called it shadow integration. The invisible child's shadow isn't their anger or their selfishness or their cruelty. It's their need, their vulnerability, their desire for connection. Everything they learned was dangerous. Everything they had to hide to survive became their shadow. And now, as an adult, those shadow aspects need to be integrated, not eliminated. Integrated. This means learning that needing people isn't weakness. It means understanding that receiving isn't the same as being needy. It means recognizing that vulnerability is actually the foundation of real connection. The invisible child became invisible because their needs were inconvenient. So they learned to have no needs. But needs don't disappear when you ignore them. They go into the shadow. They become the parts of yourself you can't acknowledge. Shadow integration means bringing those needs back into the light. It means saying I need help and not immediately feeling like you're failing. It means accepting support and not immediately trying to repay the debt. It means being vulnerable and trusting that it won't destroy you. This is terrifying work, because it means risking the very thing the invisible child learned was most dangerous. Risking that, if you show your real self, people will disappoint you. Risking that, if you express a need, no one will meet it. Risking that, if you're vulnerable, you'll end up hurt. But Jung discovered something crucial through his therapeutic work. The invisible child turned adult empath already has incredible strength. They survived emotional neglect. They developed extraordinary perception. They built remarkable resilience. The work isn't becoming strong. They're already strong. The work is learning that real strength includes the capacity to be vulnerable. Jung talked about transforming from a victim of loneliness to a master of solitude. There's a profound difference. The victim of loneliness is alone because they're afraid of connection. The master of solitude chooses meaningful connection, but no longer fears being alone. The victim needs independence because dependence terrifies them. The master understands that interdependence is actually the goal. Not dependence where you can't function without others. Not independence where you refuse all connection. But interdependence where you're whole on your own and enriched by others. This means learning to voice needs clearly, not hints. Not expectations that others should read your mind the way you read theirs. Clear, direct communication. I need support right now. I'm struggling and could use help. I'd appreciate it if you could do this for me. It feels awkward at first. Fake. Even. Like you're admitting weakness by acknowledging need. But need isn't weakness. It's humanity. And here's what Jung observed in case after case. When the adult empath finally learns to voice their needs authentically, two things happen. First, some people disappoint them. The takers who were only there for what the empath provided suddenly disappear when the dynamic shifts. And that hurts. It confirms every fear the invisible child ever had. See? I was right not to need anyone. People can't be trusted. But then the second thing happens. The people who matter, the people who are actually capable of real relationship, they step up. They meet the voiced need. They honor the vulnerability. They prove that connection is possible. And slowly, gradually, the adult empath learns something revolutionary. That being seen is worth the risk of being disappointed. Jung believed the invisible child carried something precious. They're what he called cycle breakers. They see the dysfunction others normalized. They recognize the patterns others unconsciously repeat. They have the awareness to choose differently. The invisible child who integrates their shadow doesn't just heal themselves. They heal future generations. They raise children who are emotionally seen. They build relationships based on authenticity instead of performance. They create workplaces where vulnerability is respected instead of exploited. They break the cycle of emotional invisibility. But breaking cycles requires doing the thing that terrifies you most. It requires letting people see you, really see you. Not the helpful version, not the competent version, not the together version. The real, messy, needing, vulnerable, imperfect version. And yes, some people will disappoint you. Some people will prove that your childhood fears were justified. Some people aren't safe. But Jung's promise is this: when you stop performing and start being real, you'll finally discover who actually deserves to be in your life. You'll stop attracting people who need fixing and start attracting people who are already whole. You'll stop building relationships based on what you can do for others and start building relationships based on genuine connection. You'll transform from the person everyone relies on but no one knows into the person who is truly known and genuinely loved. This is the resolution Jung offered throughout his therapeutic work. Not that the invisible child's loneliness was for nothing, but that it equipped them with the exact tools needed to build something extraordinary. Your ability to see people clearly becomes the foundation for choosing people wisely. Your experience with emotional absence becomes the motivation to create emotional presence. Your history of being unseen becomes the commitment to truly seeing others. You don't have to stay invisible. You don't have to stay in the fortress. You don't have to keep performing independence while dying for connection. You can integrate your shadow. You can voice your needs. You can receive without guilt. You can be vulnerable without catastrophe. You can be the cycle breaker Jung believed was essential for human psychological evolution. The invisible child syndrome doesn't define you. It prepared you for the work of becoming whole, for the courage of being real, for the strength of being both independent and connected. Jung's integration process isn't quick. It's not a weekend workshop or a single breakthrough moment. It's the patient work of rewiring neural pathways that have been set for decades. It's the courageous act of choosing vulnerability even when every instinct screams at you to retreat. But it's possible, and it's worth it, because on the other side of integration is something the invisible child never experienced: true connection, real intimacy, the experience of being fully known and still fully loved. If this resonated with you, if you see yourself in the invisible child turned hyper-independent adult, drop a comment below saying, "I am breaking the cycle." Let that declaration be the first step toward integration. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's psychology and the journey from survival patterns to authentic living. You're not broken. You're not too damaged. You're exactly strong enough to do this work. And the world needs more people who've done this work, who've transformed their wounds into wisdom, who've learned that real strength includes vulnerability. You are the cycle breaker, and your integration doesn't just change your life. It changes every life you touch from this moment forward. In the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.